Another tepid jobs report. At least the White House accepts the data as it again knocks the Fed and points to wage growth and capital investment as possible silver linings. A top secret SEAL team mission in North Korea, the year 2019, it went awry. Civilians died. The New York Times reporter who helped break this amazing story joins us. Do you play fantasy football? I do. I will do something, though, you might not. Invite one of the country's top fantasy football writers to critique my roster live. Yikes! Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Let me welcome you to the Takeout. We will get to the flotilla of leaking economic news in a moment. But first, we have some additions to our ever-evolving Takeout set. I told you when we launched in this unquestionably cool space that we all kind of think of as a kind of apartment, a place where I move around, and a place, of course, that we would over time spruce up. Well, first came the golden Takeout tie rack, all the neckties I no longer wear. Now, here at the family table, because until today I have totally lost the food thread, we have these square glass candy dishes. They will be fixtures. Every segment, every day. I can grab some candy. Guests can grab some candy. By the way, I buy the candy myself at random. What you see here in these candy dishes, not sponsored. At least not yet. And if the store where I bought the candy wants to sponsor us, well, I will gladly tell you its name. Over in the conversation corner, two very cool additions. First, this working gumball machine brought to us courtesy of Mabs Mobile Midway. Enhances the diner effect, don't you think? No money required, just turn the knob, gumball. Lastly, this retro desktop jukebox. It's a radio and cassette player. Youngsters, go to Google, look it up, cassette player. I will just tell you, age has not been kind to its internal mechanics. Neither the radio nor the cassette player work, but it still, if you look closely, lights up and will light up our conversations henceforth in the conversation corner. Candy, gumballs, jukebox. I told you we would have fun here, and we do. Now, to the economy and a jobs report the White House called disappointing. Here's why. A paltry 22,000 non-farm jobs added below the 75,000 forecast by leading economists. Unemployment ticked up to 4.3%. More troubling, the three-month average for monthly job creation, 29,000. It was 82,000 during the same period last year. One thing worth noting, however, the president did not label today's downbeat numbers politically manipulated, an evidence-free accusation he hurled when last month's data also disappointed on the downside. For more on the jobs report, state of the U.S. economy, we turn to Jolene Kent. Or I look straight ahead to Jolene Kent. Jolene, what jumps out at you?
You know, there's good, bad, and the ugly when it comes to this jobs report. And when you look at the revisions, looking back over the summer, for example, when President Trump got so riled up about the jobs report, we saw that June number actually go negative 13,000. So that means 13,000 jobs were actually lost. The good news is for July, the numbers were revised up a little. But as for August, when you go beyond the headline number, where were the gains? This jobs report was essentially held up by social services and healthcare jobs. Where we saw the biggest losses were areas that are often impacted by tariffs and by an uncertain economy. We're talking about, government jobs, no surprise there with DOGE involved, manufacturing, mining, and wholesale trade. Those also experience losses. But what you really see, and you probably already feel this in the economy, Major, is that firms are just holding steady. They're holding on. People are holding on to their jobs. They're hugging them, right? And they're not moving right now because there's so much uncertainty in the economy. So you can imagine all those small business owners that we constantly bring you on this show. They say they can't afford to move very much when it comes to hiring or even hanging on to people that they already have because they don't know where tariffs are going to go. They don't know what it's going to be like if they can meet their bottom line towards the end of the year. So that 6 to 9 month prediction for how tariffs, for example, might impact the economy, we're starting to see that play out right now with this weak jobs report.
Julian, some of the hot takes I saw right after this report surfaced from financial analysts was this guarantees, from their perspective, a September rate cut by the Fed and possibly encourages the Fed to think more seriously about an October rate cut.
Yes, so you basically got a big old green light when it comes to whether or not the Federal Reserve should cut interest rates in September. And now, instead of maybe just a quarter-point cut, you might also expect to see what we call a jumbo cut, maybe half a point when it comes to that benchmark rate. But overall, yes, you could see the Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell always saying he's looking at the data. And so when you look at the labor market and you look at inflation, especially PCE that came in earlier this month, and also the consumer prices, which we're going to get next week, you could see multiple rate cuts going into the end of this year, which would be great for small businesses who want to invest more in their businesses and borrow money at a cheaper rate. Credit cards, obviously, car loans, and of course, mortgages. It would be good news on that front, but a lot of people sitting on the sidelines, including employers, and that's showing up today in the data.
Jolene Kent, as always, thank you very much. I want to turn now to Justin Wolfers. He joins me. He's an economics professor at the University of Michigan. He is also brilliant and witty. Justin, I'm always delighted to talk to you. Give me your top line on what the country should take away from the jobs report today.
Time to get Botox. What do I mean by that? There's going to be all sorts of worry lines across my forehead for the rest of the next few months, mate. There's no question that the economy is slowing, and it's slowed quite dramatically. The real question is if that trajectory continues, because if it continues to slow further, we're getting close to recession territory. We're not there yet. Reading these signals is all the more difficult because we have a mass immigration purge and a slowdown in immigration and population growth right now. But it's time to pay a little attention, and if you're paying attention, to be a little worried.
Justin, I'm glad you mentioned the immigration component, because one of the things the White House noted on the upside today is they believe jobs created, though not as robust as they would prefer, are going to Native Americans, and that foreign-born workers are sort of being, in their words, wrung out of the new jobs economy. How do you evaluate that?
Yeah, it's not happening. What's happening is actually a fairly simplistic misreading of how these statistics are compiled by those in the White House. Look, here's the problem. When there's a big immigration crackdown and the federal government surveyors knock at your door and you're an immigrant, you might be less likely to answer the door. As a result, we're getting fewer responses from immigrants, and as a result, it ends up looking like immigrant employment is down or natural-born employment is up. So it's a misreading of the data. It's also not something that gives me any particular joy. There's no American who I want to see do better or worse. I want to see all of them thrive.
The White House also pointed to two other underlying statistics. They said capital investment rose by 8%. They believe that suggests future job growth, reindustrialization, onshoring of America, and wage growth, not spectacular, but 1.4% so far this year. Evaluate those two.
Yeah, so this report had no data on capital investment, but if this capital investment is about rebuilding American manufacturing, which apparently is what much of this tariff pain is about, manufacturing employment fell for the 6th month in a row. Whatever it is that we're doing, it's not working. There's a logic to that. The first page of the tariff handbook says if what you want to do is try and get jobs onshore, don't put tariffs on inputs. Immediately, the president put tariffs on steel and aluminium. There's very, very few Americans who work in steel, so it saves very, very few jobs. But there are enormous numbers, hundreds of thousands, who work in jobs that use steel as an input. Their foreign rivals, their competitors, can make cars without having to pay an extra upcharge for the steel. Americans cannot. So these tariffs are actually undermining the competitiveness of American workers and American companies through manufacturing.
I also heard someone say today that the biggest tax in America right now is an uncertainty tax. Uncertainty about tariffs, uncertainty about the duration and toothiness, if you will, of immigration crackdowns, uncertainty in the regulatory space. Do you agree with that?
I absolutely agree with it. There's actually something good that comes from a tariff. The painful part is you give up money. The good part is the government gets money and can build roads. The uncertainty tax is painful, but we get nothing back for it. It doesn't need to be this way. So think about the whole tariff telenovela that we're all living through. We had Liberation Day on April 2nd. It was all undone on April 9. We were told 90 deals in 90 days. 90 days are up. There were no deals, so they gave themselves a 24-day extension. At the end of that extension, they announced a set of tariffs that looked like what we started with, the Liberation Day tariffs. So they've now been in effect a mere couple of weeks, but the Federal Appeals Court just ruled them unconstitutional. And so now that 10 years after coming down the golden escalator, Trump finally has his tariff policy, we're now just a couple of weeks away from potentially the Supreme Court ruling the whole thing unconstitutional. It's impossible to do business under circumstances like this. There are serious debates about whether tariffs could be good or bad, but incompetence, incoherence, illegality, that doesn't help anyone.
Jolene Kent talked to us a moment ago, Justin, about Americans hugging their jobs. I've heard a phrase, no hire, no fire, meaning those who have employees are keeping them, but they are not expanding, and they're not yet, because it's not a true recession, laying people off. Walk my audience through that dynamic.
I think Jolene got this exactly right. Look, what do you do when your business is threatened by a set of tariffs that look like they might be enormous, but also might be ruled unconstitutional in a couple of weeks' time? For instance, let me tell you, I'm just going to be, tell you my story. I've wanted to buy a second car, a family car, to get around Michigan. My kids need to get around. And I'm trying to figure out when to do it. I don't want to pay the extra tariff if it's going to be off again the next day. And even though I'm an economist and I study this for a living, I've been frozen in place. I just don't know what to do next. And so think about employers as being in a similar situation, which is, I can't be confident that whatever opportunities are coming up are going to persist. So therefore, I can't expand. And I also can't be confident that whatever threats I'm facing right now are going to persist. So I think it would be a little foolish, perhaps even selfish, to let go of people just based on my fears right now. I see an American economy that's very much frozen in place.
He calls me mate. My trainer calls me mate. I respect them both. Justin Wolfers, always great to have you. Please come back. I appreciate it. Still to come on The Takeout, the New York Times uncovers how a top-secret SEAL Team 6 mission failed in North Korea. Next, a co-author of the absolute bombshell report joins us right here. President Trump is changing the Department of Defense's name back to its original name. Why the Department of War is making a comeback. Plus, the NFL is back. You probably heard about that. And that means fantasy football. An expert assesses my fantasy football team, and gives tips for you and me ahead of this weekend's action. The Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Welcome back to The Takeout. It takes quite a bit to stun me. This article from the New York Times did. It reveals a failed U.S. military operation in North Korea and a series of mistakes and shortcomings that led to the deaths, it reports, of unarmed civilians as part of this mission. The piece titled, How a Top-Secret SEAL Team 6 Mission into North Korea Fell Apart. That article, we learn about this operation 2019, greenlit by President Trump, but hidden for years from Congress and the public until now. New York Times national correspondent and co-author of this article, Dave Phillips, joins me now. Dave, I know it's difficult to summarize everything, but give my audience, if you could, the top lines of what this mission was intended to do and how, bit by bit, it fell apart.
Sure. The goal was to plant a newly developed listening device, basically a bug, on the shore in North Korea. And the way that the United States was going to do that was by sneaking a nuclear-powered sub right up to the coast and then deploying 2 small mini subs packed with a small team of Navy SEALs. Those Navy SEALs would go to the beach, go on shore, and plant the bug. But when they got to the shore, which they thought was going to be empty because it was the dead of winter and the dead of night, they encountered an unexpected boat. And not knowing whether it was a security patrol or whether they'd been spotted, they opened fire and they killed everyone on that boat.
What kind of listening device, if you know or can explain, was involved? Something, I imagine, larger than a bug that would fit inside a telephone. I'm being slightly facetious, but I'm trying to get a visual picture, if possible.
Yeah, there's a lot that we've intentionally withheld from this story because there are things that the United States may need to use again that we don't want to say too much about. But I can tell you that the goal was this was in 2019, right in the middle of high-level talks between Kim Jong-un and President Trump about denuclearization. And so the goal was to find out what the thinking of this, really this guy that we didn't know much about who had nuclear weapons, what he was going to do and what he was talking about with his officials. And so they wanted to listen in.
And President Trump, as I read the article, approved this right up until the last moment, correct?
Yeah, that's right. With any mission that is this risky, I mean, if you think about the risk involved here, yes, there's a potential gain. You might learn what your adversary is talking about and thinking, but there's a potential risk. You put SEALs on the ground and someone could get captured, someone could get wounded, and that could cause a hostage situation, or it could cause, elevating hostilities that, down the road might lead to nuclear war. So that has to be signed off at the very highest levels. And he gave the final green light go ahead right before the nuclear power sub slipped under the ocean.
And what went wrong as they have looked back at the after action on this?
Well, it seems like it was a bunch of small events that led up to a decision that they had to make that ended up with them opening fire. When these mini subs came into the bay, and these things are about the size of like a killer whale, they were expecting to see no one on the shore, and they missed that there was a small boat nearby. When they got the shore team to the shore, the mini subs repositioned so that they were prepared to exit again. And that repositioning may have attracted this little fishing boat. Yeah, about the size of the one you're showing now, an open to hold boat that had a few people on it. That boat seemed to be coming towards the area where the subs were, and the SEALs on the beach. You have to imagine you're in the dark, you're looking out at a dark ocean where there's a boat flashing flashlights, and you don't know exactly where your mini sub was. But it appeared to them from the beach that the mini subs were right under where this boat was. And they didn't know if the boat was security forces or, just some civilians out fishing at night. And so they knew if we're discovered, we're really out of luck here. And one of the senior SEALs made the decision to open fire.
And very, very quickly, Dave, they had, under the rules of engagement, pre-authorization to do precisely what they did.
That's right. And so even though it turns out that the people that they killed, by all the evidence, appear just to have been fishermen, that's allowed in these very high stakes missions by U.S. military rules.
And Congress was not told.
That's right. There's rules in place that there's some gray area in it, but generally the expectation is big deal stuff like this is going to be told to a small group of leadership in the intelligence committees. And those committees were never told by the Trump administration. In fact, it wasn't until Biden came in and learned about this mission and said, what the heck, that they were finally told.
Dave Phillips, New York Times. Amazing reporting. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it very, very much. Fleet of fighter jets is heading to the Caribbean as tensions rise with Venezuela. The latest there next. You're watching The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Here's a look at what else we and now you are watching this evening. Authorities say 475 people were detained in a raid led by Immigration and Customs Enforcement yesterday. The operation happened at a Hyundai facility in Georgia, targeting immigrants allegedly living and working in the United States illegally. Most of the detainees are Korean nationals. No criminal charges have so far been filed. A source tells CBS News the U.S. is sending 10 F-35 fighter jets to the Caribbean, targeting drug cartels. This deployment comes as tensions rise between the United States and Venezuela following a deadly U.S. strike on a boat allegedly carrying drug traffickers and narcotics in international waters. Yesterday, 2 armed Venezuelan jets flew over a U.S. missile destroyer in what defense officials called a, quote, show of force. Now to the 2025 New York City mayor's race. Mayor Eric Adams just spoke to reporters and addressed rumors that he is considering dropping out and taking a position within the Trump administration. Here is part of what Mayor Adams had to say.
Andrew Cuomo is a snake and a liar. I am in this race, and I'm the only one that can beat Mamdani. Andrew has had a career of pushing black candidates out of races.
I want to bring in our Katrina Kaufman, who is following the latest developments. This is a fast-moving story for CBS News. Katrina, I'm so glad you're with us. So just for the audience's benefit, quick reminder, the Democratic nominee who won the primary, Zohran Mamdani, Andrew Cuomo in the race, incumbent Mayor Eric Adams in the race. And as I understand it, Mayor Adams was blaming Andrew Cuomo for seeding this week the sort of clouds of speculation that the Trump White House was trying to lure the mayor out of the race.
Major, it's so great to join you. And yes, we just heard Eric Adams doubling down on staying in this race. He is accusing Cuomo of starting these rumors, as we just heard in that shot, that he says he has a history of pushing black candidates out of the race. He says that he's going to beat Mamdani, and that if there are rumors that he's in Washington on Monday, Major, he said that those are wrong, that he's going to be in New York. He said, quote, "I have two spoiled brats running for mayor." He's a working class New Yorker, and as of now, he says he is not going anywhere. He's staying in this race, but it's important to note that he's been polling far behind Cuomo.
And I've heard Andrew Cuomo give some interviews recently where he says, in September, one of us has to drop out of this race if there's going to be a serious challenge to Zohran Mamdani. Mamdani has decried all of this, saying, let the voters make this decision. So this race still feels like it's somewhat in flux.
It does, but a close advisor and friend to Adams has, besides what Adams just said in that conference, told CBS News's Marcia, that they think that Adams will drop out of this race within a week, despite what he is saying, Major. But it's a very heated race. There was a recent poll that showed, though, if it was a one-on-one head-to-head with Cuomo and Mamdani, that Cuomo could potentially win. And President Trump has also made it clear that that's what he wants. He says he doesn't want a, quote, communist leading New York, referring to Zohran Mamdani, and that he wants to see a one-on-one race here in New York for mayor.
Mamdani refers to himself as a socialist, not a communist. Katrina Kaufman, as always, thank you very much. I appreciate it. President Trump is beginning the process of renaming the Department of Defense to the Department of War. It's been more than 75 years since that name, Department of War, was used. Trump spoke about it earlier today in the Oval Office.
It really has to do with winning. We should have won every war. We could have won every war, but we really chose to be very politically correct or wokey, and we just fight forever.
Aaron Navarro joins me now from the White House. This press conference just wrapped up. That's a bit of what the president had to say about this, I guess, not rebranding, but reaching back to original branding of the Department of War.
That's right, Major. A bit of a retro throwback. As you mentioned, it had been a while since it was known as the Department of War, changed by President Truman in the 1940s. And then by Congress 2 years later to make sure that that is concrete. I want to note that the move here through this executive order is making it the Department of War in its secondary title only. Congress still has a role here in officially changing the name, but pretty much any official correspondence coming from what is now known as the Department of War can be labeled under the Department of War. You're seeing the title card for Secretary Hegseth now, the Secretary of War, as he is referring to himself as that. And I thought it was really notable, both from President Trump and Secretary Hegseth saying that when it was known as the Department of Defense, the U.S. were losing wars, and that during the Department of War era, the first time around, they won World War I and World War II. Hegseth went on to note that that's not to disparage the troops in Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, but just to say that they believe that the military has gone too, in their words, politically correct during the time of the Department of Defense, and they're looking to make not just a name change, but an attitude change with this Department of War executive order.
And it seems relevant in the context of what we were just talking about before you came on with us, Aaron. F-35s heading to the Caribbean, a kinetic military strike in international waters against an alleged Venezuelan drug cartel boat. I mean, in the Caribbean and off the shore of Venezuela, things are undisputably heating up.
Yeah, definitely. And when our own colleague Ed O'Keefe asked President Trump how he would describe that buildup in the Caribbean near Venezuela, President Trump talked about battling against the drug trafficking that he believes is coming from those states. He said, quote, "We're strong on drugs." And when asked, should Venezuela fly fighter jets above U.S. Navy ships again, President Trump said, quote, "They're going to be in trouble." So signaling that his administration might take action there should they do it again. And the department, what used to be known as the Department of Defense, has also said that they would advise against that.
Just a month ago, it was the president talking about being the president of peace. Aaron Navarro on the North Lawn of the White House. Thanks so very much. President Trump insists, doesn't necessarily make it true, but he insists the Epstein controversy is over. Up next, our political panel reacts to that claim. You're watching The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. President Trump is reiterating a claim that he made this week that the controversy on Capitol Hill surrounding convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein and convicted accomplice Ghislaine Maxwell is nothing more, the president says, than a politicized hoax. He said this again on social media just days after survivors shared their stories and called for more transparency and possible additional prosecutions while appearing with lawmakers on Capitol Hill. The president, on his Truth Social, posted, quote, "The Dems don't care about the victims. The Department of Justice has done its job. They have given everything requested of them. It's time to end the Democrat Epstein hoax." I want to bring in our political panel, Democratic strategist Joel Payne, Republican strategist Kevin Sheridan. They have dipped into the candy dishes, I'm happy to say. I've got my Almond Joy. They've got theirs. We'll be devouring them soon. Joel, I talked to the Speaker of the House in July. He said it was not a hoax. I talked to Roger Marshall, Senator from Kansas, on this program this week. He said it's not a hoax. President keeps holding on to the hoax line.
I think also Marjorie Taylor Greene would agree with you, too. And, you know, that's where I actually want to start. It was a pretty striking, remarkable scene to see Ro Khanna reach over and hug Marjorie Taylor Greene in front of the Capitol the other day. I mean, listen, that does not mean that I would expect to see Marjorie Taylor Greene caucusing with Democrats so that we forget about all the things that she's done over the years. But what it does tell you is that the truth and that transparency is pretty strong. And it can overwhelm a lot of politicization. And it might very well overwhelm what Donald Trump is trying to do by moving the goalpost here on the Epstein saga.
Kevin, in terms of political branding, President Trump has obliterated countless naysayers. He knows what branding is about. He is hung on the branding of this as a hoax. Do you think he might be misreading this one at all?
The people he needs to convince are probably not convincible, and those are the conservative influencers, some members of Congress.
Who are taking what they said during the campaign seriously.
Well, they have their own theories, and they go deep into this case on their podcasts, and they write about it, and they constantly are tweeting about it. Those are the people that he's trying to calm down, but I don't know that anything short of, yeah, this was a foreign intel op, and it implicates all sorts of high-profile men. You know, in
business and politics.
Yeah, and the victims were out on Capitol Hill, obviously, and we all feel for them and their stories. They could start naming names, though, and we still haven't heard anything.
And they very well might. They said that they are compiling their own list, and they may, if Congress does not move to a direction satisfactory to them on transparency, they may do just that.
Right, but simply calling this a hoax, I don't think is going to stop the most vocal critics, because they're just not.
Or the underlying politics of it. That will continue. So we had news just moments ago from New York City. Mayor Eric Adams called Andrew Cuomo a snake, blamed him for planting stories about him taking or thinking about taking a job in the Trump administration. The latest thing in the New York Times is ambassador to Saudi Arabia, not Turkey, which is interesting, considering the history there. Break all this down, if you could, Joel.
Zohran Mamdani is going to be the next mayor of New York City, and everybody is losing their ever-loving mind. And it seems like Donald Trump is losing his mind, because definitely seems like he's trying to put his thumb on the scale in New York. I don't know whether or not Eric Adams really considered stepping aside as mayor or stepping aside in this race, but the fact that Donald Trump actually wants to insert himself into the New York mayor's race.
What does that tell you?
I think that tells me that he's got a political death wish, because he wants a fight. It seems like he thinks he wants a fight with Zohran Mamdani in New York City, and what he doesn't realize is all he's going to do is give Democrats all across the country a big fat target to swing at with the most high-profile race this November, him versus Rahman.
Real or not, is this an imaginary infatuation with Andrew Cuomo from Trump, or is he actually wanting Andrew Cuomo to be the next mayor of New York, even though Mamdani would be a bigger, juicier national Republican target?
Yeah, if he were extremely cynical, he would want Mamdani to win, and then we would obviously run against the disaster that's going to be for New York. I think he's a New Yorker, though, and I don't think he really wants to see New York go, down the toilet.
I can't believe that Zohran Mamdani wants to do federally owned or state-owned grocery stores. Wait a minute. Intel, 10%? Donald Trump is okay with the government owning companies?
Hey,
maybe there's a
but New York
Mamdani Trump horseshoe that we're not talking about.
Kevin, do we need a Department of War instead of Department of Defense?
You don't like it?
I'm just wondering.
Well, we had it for 175 years before they changed it in 1948 or whatever. Look, I don't think it matters.
For a globe that was traumatized by two catastrophic global wars, World War I and World War II. So the idea was, let's talk about defense, because war is a gruesome, brutal thing, and we've seen two colossal global conflicts, and we're all a little traumatized.
And now I think Democrats are all going to be anti-war, so this is probably a good little troll.
Our president was anti-war.
Like I said, a month ago, he was the president of peace.
Well, what are you going to call it? The Department of Peace? That's not going to work.
The Department of Defense seemed to work pretty well. You know what's interesting to me about this? Donald Trump, I'm old enough to remember when Donald Trump said, I will end all wars. I'll end all wars on day one. He just a couple of weeks ago touted how many wars he thinks he ended in his presidency.
And what is going on in Venezuela, Kevin? I mean, 3 battleships. We got F-35s going there. We got Venezuelan jets flying over. This is not a game.
It's barely being talked about.
It's not a game. It's a real thing.
Yeah, this is in our own, this is on our side of the globe, and we're actually maybe going to war. It's a hot situation down there. I don't know.
Do you think the president deserves to explain more to the country about what's going on?
Yeah, eventually he's going to have to do like a national address on this if we're actually taking on a neighbor of ours.
Kevin Sheridan, you get the last word and the Reese's. Kit Kat and Crackle for Joel Payne. Thank you both very much. I appreciate it. Where are we going, Guy? Okay, number 2. That's all right. Americans are not drinking beer like they used to. We take a closer look at why sales are going down. That's next here on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Thanks for staying with us. This caught our eye. The parent company of 2 of the most popular beers in the country says demand for their beverages is on the decline. Modelo and Corona Beers, the importer Constellation Brands, is projecting a drop of 2 to 4% in beer sales this fiscal year. It highlighted a specific drop in sales among Hispanic customers, who account for roughly half of Constellation Brands' market. I discuss alcohol consumption trends generally and beer specifically with Sam Slaughter, the association manager for the South Carolina Brewers Guild. I did so earlier today. Sam, it's great to have you with me. I appreciate your time. Big picture question. What is happening to beer sales nationally? What are the trend lines, and is it of overarching concern to the industry?
So overall, beer sales, whether it's craft or domestic, we are seeing a decline kind of across the board. And while there are some concerns about that, I don't think it is as big a concern as maybe the numbers straight up indicate.
And why is that?
One of the good things about, especially the craft beer industry, and we're seeing it in with a lot of the domestics as well, is the companies are pivoting to other things. So while maybe an IPA, while that was very popular in years past, or a double IPA or something like that, these companies are now evolving and incorporating these non-beer drinks into their portfolios as well. So whether it's a non-alcoholic beer or something like a hard seltzer, even THC or THCA beverages. There's a whole line of things now that these companies are all doing to stay with the times and stay with what drinking trends are showing.
And is it true that drinking trends are showing a pullback from alcohol across the board?
I think there is that kind of across the board, especially with younger generation, for sure, people in their 20s. The statistics indicate that there is less drinking going on because of the alternatives that there are, whether, again, like the THCA beverages is a big industry now, but even non-alcoholic just beverages, whether they are the kind of the probiotic sodas or the wide variety of just seltzers that are available, whether it's LaCroix or Polar, you can go on and find innovation in these areas where we're getting flavors that back 10, 20 years ago just didn't exist. And so we're given a lot more options now. And so when you think about what is trending or what people are doing, there's just a lot more to choose from. And so people are picking and choosing based on, what they are doing in terms of their own health or finances or any number of reasons.
Is there any reason to imagine, Sam, that this going into football season, the holidays, that there could be an uptick in consumption?
I think around certain holidays or certain sporting events. So obviously the Super Bowl is one that comes to mind, or the kickoffs for NBA or NHL. There's always going to be that kind of push, but it's the same thing every year. So if you think of it as a wave, it's going to ebb and flow the same way every year. Just the same as with, say, chicken wings and the Super Bowl. People plan for that, or those companies plan for that because they know that is the big time for that, and then they kind of plan out the rest of the year accordingly.
Sam, does any of this filter through overall assessments of the economy? Is this a consumer hesitant issue, or is this an alcohol hesitant issue?
I think my thought would be that it is more towards the alcohol and health issue. We have had a lot more conversation kind of the world over about our own health and taking care of our bodies. And so as there is more research being done, as there are more alternatives being offered out there, people are seeing that, hey, we can be social without having to impact whether it's our waistline or, organ function, things like that. If you have an option to get some sort of buzz without putting on 300 calories, 400 calories, whatever it is, I think most people would, most of the time, take that if they are one to worry about their health, worry about their wellness and their, cardio, et cetera.
Sam, I have in my notes here that there is one outlier to our conversation. That is the Kelsey Brothers Garage Beer. Apparently, they're doing quite well. Big injection of investment. And that would suggest at least a celebrity component to this conversation that we should probably pay some attention to.
For sure. And you see this a lot more in the spirits industry, whether it's Casamigos with George Clooney or The Rock has his own tequila. A lot of celebrities have gotten into the spirits or beer game because it's a great way to enhance their own brand, but also for people that really do love a certain celebrity and want to support them in some way other than going to see the movies or going to see a band. It allows them that kind of connection, maybe. And for the Kelsey Brothers beer specifically, they have a beer that's made for football. Like, it's made to drink with friends, it's made to drink around while watching sports. And so it has that component as well when you're thinking about something easy drinking that you can have a couple of and enjoy, with friends and stuff. They really nailed it as far as the marketing and just the overall everything about it.
Great perspective on all this. Sam Slaughter, Association Manager for the South Carolina Brewers Guild. I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Next, the NFL is back. You probably heard something about that, which means Week 1 bragging rights are on the line for fantasy football team owners. Next, who to start and who to sit. And what's my roster look like? Sports Illustrated senior fantasy analyst Michael Fabiano, he's a great get, joins me to reveal his answers and, as I mentioned and promised, critique my roster. I'm scared of that. Really, I am. You're watching The Takeout. Welcome back. The Philadelphia Eagles drew first blood last night in a victory over the Dallas Cowboys that kicked off the new NFL season. But who won and who lost wasn't the only reason people tuned in. For many Americans like me, well, it's all about your fantasy football team, your roster, and who to start, who to sit. Here to assess my team and give you advice for yours, Sports Illustrated senior fantasy analyst Michael Fabiano. And Michael, I want you to know, if you didn't know, is a Fantasy Sports Writers Association Hall of Famer. I am always delighted to be in the presence of Hall of Famers, Michael, so thank you. All right, give it to me raw. Take my roster apart, and if it needs to go to the cleaners, tell me why.
I do like that you have balance. Lamar Jackson was the best quarterback in fantasy last year. My guess is that you probably drafted him in the 3rd round. Nico Collins was probably your 1st rounder. Josh Jacobs, your 2nd. I like Xavier Worthy. As long as Rashee Rice is suspended, he is going to be the #1 option in Kansas City. Cortland Sutton was an underrated player last year, assuming this is a PPR league. Jake Bates is one of the best kickers. I do have concerns about the consistency of Tucker Kraft, so you may be looking to play the matchups there, maybe the waiver wire. And I also heard that you had the Texans defense, but picked up the Cardinals. So I'm guessing that you had to read my Stardom and Sid'em column over at Sports Illustrated, where the Cardinals defense is the start of the week against New Orleans. Well done, my friend.
Yes, well, we picked up the Cardinals with a waiver transaction after the draft because we took a look at their first 6 games, and they all set up pretty nicely. And if you can grab a few fantasy points from your defense and special teams, that can oftentimes be the difference. I will break your heart, though, and tell you, because we're in a flex league, so we all start 2 quarterbacks. We grabbed Lamar Jackson in the 1st round. We were at the 2nd pick in our draft, and we had to go with Lamar Jackson because in a 2-quarterback league, you've got to have, if you can get one, a running quarterback as well as a throwing quarterback. So that's my explanation there.
No question. In the Superflex League, the quarterbacks are going to come flying off the board. So Lamar, obviously a very good pick. 430 fantasy points last year. Not sure he's going to do that again, but he will be in the top 5. There's no question about that.
Now, Michael, we all have to admit that there is something kind of neurotic about this. There is a neurosis that goes with this because we actually imagine ourselves as general managers and doing all this research and involving ourselves at such an emotional level with something that is completely fictitious.
It is maybe the greatest hobby in sports. And I have seen this industry grow in my over 25 years doing this. I actually started at CBS. This was back in the early 2000s. And being a fantasy manager and playing in fantasy leagues is now hand in hand with watching the games. Can you imagine not playing fantasy football for the rest of your life if you're a football fan? I certainly cannot. And everyone has embraced it. You see the NFL had embraced it. All of the major networks embrace it to go along with a lot of the wagering that goes on these days. So yeah, fantasy football is here to stay. And it's been great to see it grow. I mean, we're talking about tens of millions of people who play this great hobby. And it is also a great way to stay in touch with people, college friends that maybe you don't see very often, family. And I've got some celebrity leagues with some folks that I'm in, and they all want to beat me. Like, I'm the Yankees in these leagues. They all want to take me down. I would say I was the Cowboys, but, well, you know how that goes.
That's a little difficult to say these days. Not such a great on-field record, but a tremendous financial record, and that's a credit to Jerry Jones. Very quickly, give me one name people should keep in mind for this weekend's rosters.
I know you have Chuba Hubbard, and so I will give you a pat on the back and say that he should be in lineups this week against Jacksonville. They were very, very vulnerable to running backs last season, and Hubbard averaged more than 16 fantasy points per game last year. He was one of the best breakout running backs in fantasy football. So stick with Chuba Hubbard in your lineup this week.
Michael, I will tell you this. I was scared of this encounter. It's turned out much better than I imagined. Please come back. The NFL season grinds on, and we will have you as often as we can if you'll be willing. Michael Fabiano, I appreciate it very much.
Would love to be back. Thank you.
Here's what I'm going to tell you. Happy Friday, everyone. We are the Takeout. Imitated, never equaled. Please stick around. The Daily Report starts right now.